Hello guys and gals, and welcome to a new tutorial. In this video we're going to be covering the Wind Waker water that I showed you previously on my channel and on Twitter. To make this you are going to need a texture that I'll provide you with, and I'm also going to provide you just with a static mesh. It just has a couple of subdivisions on there just so that we get a few vertices that we can move around later using world position offset. As usual, if you're supporting me on Patreon, you're going to be able to just download this completed already, as well as a blueprint that will let you replicate where the water is over a much larger space. We're not going to be covering that in the tutorial. This tutorial is just going to be based on the material itself. So, once you have those downloaded, we'll begin. Right-click, new material. Oh, we just got to stop this. There we go. Right-click, new material, and we'll call this Wind Waker _M. And we're going to open this up. Now we're not going to mess around with any of the defaults, we're just going to leave it as it is, because for the most part we don't want this to be translucent, and we want it to be regularly lit. So what we'll do first is we'll just drag in our Wind Waker texture here, and because this is a black and white image, we're going to be using this as a mask to blend between two different colours. You can see here that we have three colours. We have this extra streakiness in there. It is quite slight, but it is there. And to do this, we're going to be using a blend on top of some lerps later on, but for now we're just going to be lerping. So if you hold L and left click, you'll create a lerp node. And what a lerp node will do is it will blend between the A and the B values based on an alpha map, which is 0 to 1 or black to white. So anything grayscale will blend these two values. What we're going to do is we're just going to plug the texture straight into the alpha map, and then we will hold 3 and left click for a 3 vector, and we'll open this up. Now I've already saved the colors so that we can get this exactly the same, but I'm just going to select them, and then the numbers that you're going to need are in the red 0.026, in the green 0.026, and in the blue 1. Now the reason I've given those a slight red and slight green values just to take away from the very dark blue, we're just giving it just a little bit more of a variance in there, just because exact blue was a bit too strong. It didn't quite work out very well, so there's just a very small hint of red and green in there just to break it up. We're going to plug that into the A, and then we'll hold 3 and left click again, and we'll plug this into the B. And this time we're going to be using a very, very near white color, but it just favors blue ever so slightly. So 0.859 in the red, 0.939 in the green, and 1 in the blue. And now if we were to right click and start previewing this node, we'll be able to see we have our white foam on our blue, which is grand. Now to get our darker blue pieces in there, we're just going to copy all of this and paste it. And we know that our B is where our lines are, so we're going to change our B value to the darker blue, which is 0, 0, and then 0.159, so we get a very, very deep and dark blue. And if we were to preview this node now, we will be able to see much darker lines on our previous light blue. So we'll stop previewing this. What we're going to do now is we're going to use a node that's very much like one of the layers in Photoshop, which is blend screen. And we'll plug our first lerp into blend and our second lerp into base. And what this is going to do is it's going to make sure that our second set of values here, or our darker values, are below our lighter values. So it's going to put the lighter ones on top and keep the darker ones on the bottom. If we were to preview this now, we won't see any difference. It's just going to be our white on our blue. And the reason for this is because currently the white and the very dark blue are taking up exactly the same space on the UVs. So we'll just quickly stop previewing this and we'll plug it into the base color, like so. So what we need to do is we need to offset the UVs that are using our dark blue, which is this texture sample here. This is why we've created a second one, because we need two different sets of UV data. To do this, what we're going to do is we're going to hold a U and left click for a texture coordinate. Then we will hold A and left click for an add node. We'll plug the texture coordinate into the add and set the B for the add to 0.5. And then plug this into the UVs. And what this does is it's going to shift our UV values by 0.5. Because this is a tiling texture, we're not going to see any sort of seams. It's just going to move our origin point along to the center. When this catches up, we'll be able to see now that we have an offset. See here, we can now see our dark blues, like so. Now we're not going to just leave this here like this, because we need these to move. As you can see here, they are panning around, and we can see that we've got a bit of distortion. So we're not just going to leave this plugged in, we are going to add a little bit to it. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a way to increase the scale of our texture. To do this, we're going to hold a U and left click for another texture coordinate. We're going to hold M and left click for a multiply node. Then we'll hold S and left click for a scalar, and we'll call this UV scale. And we'll give this a default value of 1, and we will just plug our UV scale into a multiply for the texture coordinate. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to hold M and left click for another multiply, which we'll put in before our add here, and then plug our UV scale also into the second multiply. Now we can ensure that both textures are using the exact same scale while we're still offsetting the second one, because we're adding in a UV, adding in an extra UV value after we've scaled it. So we can now plug this into our texture sample, and if we were to change the scale, we'd be able to see this tile more or less. Still not quite what we want though. We need these to move. And to have them move, we're going to use a panner. So we'll hold P and left click to create a panner, and we'll plug our multiply into the coordinate and then into the UVs. And what we're going to do is we're going to give them a 0.05 in the X and a negative 0.05 in the Y. And we're just going to copy this panner and paste it down below. And we will plug this in to our second texture. That's going to move them both at exactly the same rate and at exactly the same direction. From the source material that I've seen, this is how the water looks while it's in the game. Both of these move within the same, move the same direction. Obviously, they're being pushed by waves, so that's how they would work. You can see here now we're getting this nice movement. We're still not getting any kind of wobble on our little foamy bits. Now you might be thinking we're just going to distort our texture using a noise map. It's close to what we're going to be doing, but we're not going to distort the texture. What we're going to distort is going to be the UVs. So I'm going to teach you a little trick to how we can distort the UVs a little. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold P and left click for a panner. And what we'll do here is we'll give this a value of what were we using? 0.1 and negative 0.1. There we are. And we'll hold T and left click for a texture sample. And this is going to be oops, if I spell it correctly, we should have a water normal, I believe. Let's see. Search for water. Texture water N. I believe this is the right one. We'll just make sure that this is the one that I've used previously. T_N. Just double check. It is starter content, so you will have access to this, so don't worry about it. Open this guy up. Just double check. I just want to make sure that we get it exactly the same for you guys. Yep, it is. There we are. So it's T_water_N, and it is in the starter content / textures, so you will have access to this. I won't need to give this to you. We'll plug the panner into this texture sample. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take this data and we're going to add it into our UVs, right? If we were to go ahead and open the texture up like this, if we were to remove the blue, you can see we just have red and green, which is what our textures UV coordinates are using. They just use red and green channels. So what we can do is we can drag out from our RGB pin, we can component mask, and we're just going to take out the R and the G. We don't want blue, we'll ignore blue. Then what we can do is we can head to our little multiply node here, and after this we'll hold A and left click for an add. And we're going to add the mask to the UVs. We're not going to plug this straight into the panner just yet. We're going to go ahead and preview the node. We'll just change this to a plane so we can see this. And now you can see that on our UVs, we're getting some distortion. It's pushing the UVs around, right? The reason this is important rather than using a noise map is because if we use a noise map, it's going to break the texture and the texture is going to look a little bit weird. by distorting the UVs, we're just going to move where the texture is being projected based on this distortion. So if we were to go ahead and plug this directly into our panner, this might look a little bit over the top, and that's because we haven't changed any of the values, so this is going to really push it like so. So you can see it's really pushing it around and breaking these up, but you can still see the overall kind of shapes. It's not getting pushed around by a noise. To make sure that this isn't quite as powerful, what we're going to do is, before we mask out, we're going to hold M and left click for multiply. And this is essentially just going to be how powerful this is. We're going to turn this down to 0.2. And now what we'll get is we'll get 1/5 of that distortion, and it's just going to make it wobble ever so slightly. There we are, and we're getting this nice little wobble going on now. So that's all cool. We've got that added in. It's going into our panner and then to our texture. But what about the second guy? Well, the second guy, we don't want to match this with exactly the same wobble. If we were to match it with exactly the same kind of wobble, it's going to look really obvious that it's tiling. What we're going to do is we're just going to copy and paste our panner with our texture and our multiply. And from our little panner here, we're just going to flip the values. So we're going to say -0.1 and 0.1. And that's going to move the normal map in the opposite direction. So we're going to get a different type of distortion. And you may have guessed it, we need an add. So we'll hold A and left click. And we're going to add this in after we've moved where the offset is. So we add like so into our panner. And now we will have both of our foamy bits wobbling, but in a different pattern because they're going in opposite directions. It's pretty cool. So that's the colors done, and that's the wobbly bits done. The next thing that we need to do is we need to make it wave. So you can see here we're getting this nice wave. We need to change that inside of our material. We need to actually build that. To do this, we're going to create our own little wave using a sine node. What we're going to need to do is we're going to need to get our world position, and then we're going to hold V and left click for a vector parameter, and we're going to call this wave direction, and then we're just going to put in brackets a wave amount. So we're going to be using the RG and the B as X, Y, and Z values to determine which direction we're moving, and the alpha is going to be how many waves we have on our surface. We're just going to default this out to 1, 1, 1, and in the alpha, we're going to set this to 0.001, like so. Then what we're going to do is we're going to drag out from the world position, and we're just going to dot product between the two values here, like so. And what this is going to do is it's going to compare our two vectors to one another and see where they are in relation to each other. Then what we'll do is we'll hold M and left click, and we will multiply the dot by the alpha, and this will allow more than one wave to occur. This on its own isn't really going to do much, so we need to change, well, we need to add a little bit more to it. We're going to hold V and left click for another vector parameter, and then we're going to call this wave offset, and this is how much we're going to be pushing, and then in brackets A for speed, and that's going to be how quick the waves will move. We're only really going to want to move these upwards. We don't want the waves to go sideways because we're using wave direction for this. Our wave offset, we just really want to mess around with the blue value, and we're going to set that to a default of 10 and a 1 for the speed. Now, to change how quick our speed will work, we're going to need a time node, so we'll hold M and multiply, hold M and left click for a multiply rather, plug our alpha into the top, and then we're going to right click time and plug this into the B. So we're going to multiply our speed by our time. And then what we need to do is we need to add this in to our wave direction and position. So we'll hold A and left click, plug our multiply in to the A and the B, like so. And this can then get plugged into a sine node. Now what a sine node will do is it will take these values and it will push them to 1 and then back down towards 0 in a wave. -1 and 1, not 0. Up to 1, down to -1 in a wave over and over again. We will multiply that value by the offset amount, like so, which is the RGB from our wave offset. So we're going to take 1, multiply it all the way up to, in this case, 10. So it's going to go up to 10, and then it's going to go down to -10. We're going to get this nice offset for our waves. The last thing we need is a multiply, and we need to know where we're pushing this. So we get a vertex normal world space. Plug this into the multiply, and then this multiply into our world position offset, like so. And then we can control which way our waves are moving using wave direction and how many waves we have with wave amount. And in our wave offset, we can control how high we want the waves to be and how quick they are. We'll press apply. So now we can see we're getting this nice bobbing up and down. And we're getting our nice little wiggly waves. So now what we'll do is we will head back to where we have it, and we will right click, create a material instance, and this is going to be what we place onto our plane. Now we're just going to drop this into our world. This is just a default plane here. Well, not the default plane, rather the plane that I've provided you with. We're just going to hide the other for now. And we're going to put the instance on top of our waves. And you can see our lovely, lovely waves wiggling around like so. Now then, to get it looking exactly like we had inside of the example, we're going to have to open up our instance, change that to a sphere, and we'll open up the previous instance that I had open. And we're just going to match all of these lovely values here. So I've gone for, in the wave offset, 20 in the blue, so we're pushing it a little bit higher, and the alpha, I've gone for a 0.2, I believe it was a 0.2. Yep, there we are, which is our speed, so we've slowed it down. Our wave direction, we just 1, 1, and then we've left the amount of waves down, so we'll just take that out. And our UV scale, I've bumped that up to 5, like so. And when you bump that value up to 5, you're going to notice that we're no longer getting quite the amount of breakage on these foamy bits, and that's exactly what we wanted. Before this was 5, you may have noticed that there was a bit too much distortion on these things. You see they're breaking up, and that's not what we wanted. That's not how it looks. They just kind of wobble. By changing just the scale of the foam and not changing the amount of scale on the UV distortion, the distortion is going to happen over a much smaller area. So it's not going to break it down. And there it is. And to make sure that you get the colors exactly the same, because yours is going to look a little bit different from this, in the post-processing, I've just gone ahead and in saturation, I bumped it up to 2. Yours by default is going to look like this. If you bump your saturation up, it gets to be a much toonier color. And there you have it. Obviously, now if you wanted to take more of these and duplicate them along, because it's tiling, as long as you line them up properly, it's going to be absolutely fine. And they will tile. I mean, that's not lined up. There we are, ish. Close enough. I've got snapping turned off. Turn snapping back on, Dean. What are you doing? Never turn snapping off. Ooh, there we are. And you'll be able to just tile these to your heart's content, or just make a big one and change the scale as necessary. There you go. We've built ourselves a neat little wave using a sine, and we've done some funky little maths just to, you know, push it around. We've also distorted the UVs. That's not something that I've shown you guys how to do on the channel before. Distorting the UVs in that manner using a normal map is actually a really cool little trick. You can get some really nice looking effects using that. But there it is. As I say, there is a blueprint. I'm not going to show you guys how to make this. This blueprint, it was literally, so if we were to get rid of these real quick, it allows me to just replicate these really quickly. So it builds from the center. So if I was to set this to 1 on 1, there we go. That's just going to be a Patreon exclusive. It's the first time I'm going to do a Patreon exclusive. That I'm not going to sit here and go through that with you because this is just for the material. But there you go. Let's just set this to have this as a default. So if we were to drop this back into our world, lovely. There we are. And that's how you can do it, guys. That's how you can set up a nice little Wind Waker style toony water. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've learned something. It's been fun. I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.